Welcome to another episode of National Divorce Talk Raw, where we cover the top news regarding secession, self-determination, and the future independence of California or independence movements around America. We have a new update for you. Sorry for the hiatus. We've been working very hard to get the Yes California Calexit campaign website up, and we finally did that. You can go to calexit.podia.com or calexit.info to see the new website. We finally have that up with online certification, coins for purchase, merch for purchase, and books to download for free. Anyways, let's get right into the roundup. I want to show you this video first.
The cat's just like, dude, what? You left the door open. This is what happens. I told you.
If you could get rid of one U.S. state, what would it be, and why did you pick California?
Yep. So that's a little bit of comedy to get this show going, because it's going to get pretty serious when we talk about how Roe v. Wade was overturned, and now that has destroyed Californians' faith in America. We'll get right into that. Wanted you to laugh first before it gets too serious. Anyways, welcome to the National Divorce Talk Raw, the primary show sponsored by Yes California, aimed to keep you, the California voter, informed about what's going to happen to the near future. Let's get right into the show. Got a series of clips for you showing how Californians are reacting to the political climate at this time. We'll show you. So here's the first one. This should start off what we're going to talk about for the rest of the show.
Crystal, what are you taking a look at?
Well, guys, it is officially done after 50 years of focused activism, as we've been discussing, from committed right-wing radicals and their well-heeled allies. Roe has been overturned, allowing states to ban abortion completely. Over half of all states are certain or likely to take the opportunity to do exactly that. The response from both partisan sides has been entirely predictable. Republicans have responded with further extremism, and Democrats with total impotence and excuse-making. In fact, Democratic response is actually so sad and their failure so undeniable. I actually wonder if this moment might shift the mindset of more than a few liberals, opening them up to a critique of the party that they just had not been ready to hear until now. More on that in a minute. Let's start with the GOP side. So not satisfied with leaving abortion policy up to the states, former Vice President Mike Pence, the guy supposedly the reasonable and honorable alternative to Trump, he chimed in immediately to push for an absolute nationwide ban on abortion. He wrote, quote, "Having been given this second chance for life, we must not rest and must not relent until the sanctity of life is restored to the center of American law in every state in the land." Listen, Pence is hardly alone. House and Senate Republicans have already introduced legislation to ban abortion nationwide. House version has 164 sponsors. The Senate has 19. Every Republican will now be under pressure from the same organized forces that just secured the overturning of Roe to codify this result nationwide, forcing Mississippi laws on everybody across the country, up to and including Californians. At the same...
There you go. So that is why Californians are freaking out, is because Roe v. Wade was overturned. People were shocked that could happen, and now they're wondering what's next. And you have Republicans already talking about banning abortion outright across all states, which means that Californians would have to live under the rules of, like she said, Alabamians, New Orleanians, Louisianans, people who come from a extremely conservative southern state. They would be making laws, and that would be forced on you in California, and you would have to do what they would say. And the decision for abortion would not be left back to the state of California. Those rights would be taken away from us. So Crystal here is seeing that. A lot of Californians are seeing it. They saw the same thing that Crystal pointed to about Republicans talking about a nationwide ban. Well, let's take a look.
signs of societal decline. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. American confidence in the presidency and Supreme Court has suffered the greatest drop ever between 2021 and 2022. So a lot of people, Crystal, were focusing on the U.S. Supreme Court, which declined from 36% great deal trust to 25%. Obviously, in light of the Roe versus Wade decision, that's noteworthy. But how is nobody pointing to this figure? The presidency has gone from having a 38% great deal / quite a lot trust figure to 23%. That is.
So Californian and Americans' trust, but particularly Californians, has been decimated in the Supreme Court in the wake of this ruling. And that's also ruined some of the support Californians have or faith in the presidency, because they're like, you were president. How could this happen while you were here? So we have Roe v. Wade gets overturned. There is now people talking about removing Californians' rights to have access to abortions, not leaving it at just return to the states. And you see Californians and other Americans having massive loss of faith in the Supreme Court and the presidency to levels never before seen. Here's a little more evidence on that. That is the San Francisco Chronicle, how the Supreme Court threatens California's democracy. So they're not just saying the decision's bad. They're going, the Supreme Court itself is now a threat to California's democracy. That's what San Francisco Chronicle says in response. That's pretty strong language that the court is now a threat to the functioning of the state of California itself, not just a threat to a particular right. Very strong language. Also, here we go, the Public Policy Institute of California, the official think tank of the California government. Californians' trust in Washington is low, with the Supreme Court issuing consequential and controversial decisions, and Congress and White House locked in gridlock. How much trust do Californians have in the federal government? It's very low. So it's, let's see, for Democrats and Republicans turn this higher. Independent. So on everybody, you can see it's dropped dramatically. Here's Dems have dropped. Here's Republicans have dropped. Independents were a little bit high. So everybody's dropped. Drop on independents, drop on Democrats, drop on Republicans. Extreme drop. Only 1 in 4 Californians trust the federal government now. So a lot of lack of faith in the federal government and especially the Supreme Court, but also the presidency, as you've seen in these documents here. But I also want to point out to you, this is the Press Democrat. This is by Wednesday's letters to the editor. We're out of free articles. I'm going to show you what this said. I just wanted you to see. The Press Democrat is located here in California, in Napa and Sonoma County. These letters came from July 13th, 2022. And they're from regular Californians. And so I'm going to show you what the Press Democrat person said. Let me show you to that right now. So here's what the person at the Press Democrat said. This wrecking ball of a Supreme Court is just getting started. In its next session, the court already agreed to hear a case in which it could effectively give state legislatures unchecked power to overturn federal election results and appoint their own states of electors. Such a ruling would mean the end of democracy in America. It would be the beginning of a permanent one-party autocracy. Did you see what they said? That's from the Press Democrat. That's a regular California pointing out that the Supreme Court's not done with Roe v. Wade. They're going to look into other decisions, and one of them is going to consider the ability of states to gerrymander voting districts. If the Supreme Court says that states can gerrymander voting districts how they want, it would, quote, such a ruling would mean the end of democracy in America. He's not alone. A lot of people get it. Just wanted to show you that's one Californian who's starting to see the writing on the wall. I came here from the Press Democrat. Also want to point out this by Mother Jones. The system worked for people who work the system. So Roe v. Wade was killed by minority rule. This is Mother Jones pointing out something that we have said for years, which is that the Constitution gives power to states and not people. 35 states are conservative. 35 is a majority out of 50 states. That means that they can control the law and they can force laws on you that you don't necessarily want. This is Mother Jones. This article is all about them finally figuring out what we have been saying for years. and it would lead to this.
Some more signs of societal decline. Let's go ahead and put this up.
So, all right. And then loss of rights like this.
Mississippi laws on everybody across the country, up to and including California.
So Mother Jones is cluing in that that's what can happen because you have 35 states doing this. And it's not a good sign for the future. So let's take a look at this.
Families, multi-generational poverty. You see that in all kinds of towns and rural areas outside the big metropolitan centers. So the Democrats have the big cities, which have become more and more prosperous and better educated, and the Republicans have the towns and countryside, which have in many areas been sort of abandoned. And so that's where populism of the Trump variety has come from.
It also damages, doesn't it, the kind of constitutional setup that America is, because you have this superabundance of power or imbalance of power in the way America was set up in order that rural parts of America would have a proper say, which sort of worked, didn't it, when it was Republicans and Democrats who were competing for power in those rural areas. But now if you have that ossification on party lines that you're talking about, it makes it really does strike at the kind of fundamentals of the Constitution. I'm thinking of, how the Senate is set up with two senators from even tinier states, et cetera, et cetera. All those things somehow are in play.
They are.
So that's the show America's Last Best Hope. You have a British journalist talking to an American political expert, and what they're saying is exactly what Mother Jones is saying. 35 states control America. They are a minority of the population. Their values are massively out of line with people on the coast, but because of the way the Constitution works with the Senate and the Electoral College, and the fact that the Supreme Court is justices are picked because of the president, which is controlled by the presidential Electoral College and confirmed by the Senate, which is in the unfair Senate election process, then therefore you have an unfair constitutional system that's not really democracy. So these guys are saying it. That's what you just heard. Roe v. Wade is saying it. And basically that's what this article is getting at by San Francisco Chronicle. You don't have democracy because of the Constitution, which is why these horrible decisions get this to go. Anyways, happen. So here we go. Last clip.
Is doing their job, and they are stopping 1.5 million illegal border crossings in fiscal year 2022 alone. It's a record. Yes, the border is open, and here on Outnumbered, we've covered the children in a way that I would argue no other network has, because there has been an expose on CBS. There was one, I believe it was at NBC, about emergency intake facilities, about little boys complaining that they were getting feathers and bloody and raw chicken in Joe Biden's America in these facilities, kids on suicide watch lists, girls aged 13 to 17 urinating in bags. Where's MSNBC? I thought you guys were great humanitarians. Where's CNN? Where's Joe Biden? Why isn't the media allowed? We covered here on Outnumbered. I'm proud that we...
So exactly right. Kayleigh McEnany worked for the Trump administration. I'm not saying that I'm a fan, but I am saying she's telling the truth. We're very progressive in California, but what's the difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump when they both keep Latin kids in cages? So Donald Trump had children in concentration camps. Did it. Democrats were mad and upset and said that's the most racist, white supremacist thing you can do. Joe Biden's done the exact same thing for the last 2 years. So what does that mean? Joe Biden's a white supremacist? Kamala Harris and Nancy Pelosi have not criticized him for this same behavior they criticized Trump for over the last 2 years. So what does that mean? Kamala Harris is a white supremacist? Nancy Pelosi is a white supremacist? When Donald Trump put Latin kids in cage, white supremacy is taking over. That's what it means. End of story. They've done this for 2 years, not 2 months, 2 years. And the half African-American vice president could say nothing. And then the representative of California, Nancy Pelosi, and our values could say nothing. And Joe Biden does this, and he's the return to decency. So to me, what that says is that Latin kids in concentration camps is cool. And it actually is what America's about and America's true character, because you had the Republican do it and the Democrat do it. And 2 Californians went to the federal government and said nothing about it. So what's the difference between the left and the right at that national level when they both enact policies that are outright disgusting to Californians? Wanted to leave that with you. So we showed you how Roe v. Wade was overturned. Californians are not having it, and they are now questioning the ability to have faith in the federal system at all. And I wanted to end it by pointing out, don't believe that the Democrats are better than the Republicans. Okay, if they're both doing Latin kids in cages, they're not that different, especially when it comes to real California values. We would never, ever tolerate that here in California. Okay, that's it for this show. We'll see you next time.